right. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming to our WordPress meetup. For the new folks, thanks for coming. Hope you got plenty of food out there. There's plenty more. If you want some, or take it home. Go in the trash. If you need restrooms, there's plenty just out to the right. If you need the Wi-Fi code, it's just right here. Quick announcements. So next week, if you look at the meetup schedule, I messed up and I updated them all to this title. So she's not presenting every month.
Forever.
I will fix that tonight. But next month we have Jim going to be talking about metadata on how to mark up and validate your site in Google and Facebook. But tonight we have an MECQ teaching us how to skip 4 years of design school in 1 hour. I like it. So over there, it's not 3.5 years. It's not 3 3/4 years. It's 4 years. So make sure to keep track. All right. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, Amy CQ. Yeah, so I'm kind of going to jump right into it because I have a lot of information, even though I kind of promised you 4 years and 1 hour. I timed it. It is an hour. And I will say I kind of picked this title a little bit to say it's not to dissuade anybody from going to design school. If you want to go or have friends or family or whatever, they should go to design school. But what I'm just trying to give is that foundational aspects of all visual design that you take 4 years of practice to really learn how to use in school. But all the stuff that I'm going to go over applies to any visual design that you come across, whether that is a WordPress website, whether it's print, whether it's logos or branding and design, that kind of thing. It all applies. It even applies to other design-related industries, fashion, interior, all that stuff. That's not really my expertise area, but it still applies. So first we have to go into like, what's good design? Like, how do you decide what's good design? And if you ask a designer who's probably wearing some kind of black turtleneck or whatever, because they are supposed to, they'll say things like, it's useful, strategic, it's form and function, it's user-friendly, it's unobtrusive, all these words. But sometimes these words are very subjective. And what happens is then, when you're in the situation and you're looking at a piece to decide, do I like this? It kind of falls back to what it looks like. Do I like it? Is it pretty? Is it not pretty? And that's very subjective. So we're going to try to separate that into saying, what's effective? Does it do its job? Is it helping the goal of whatever this piece that you're making or not? So that's kind of my next slide, is that the goal plus your design bag of tricks is really what has to make the connection. So whether your client's goal is to, well, most of the time is to have more sales, but more specifically, I want people to sign up. I want people to come to my shop to buy this thing. I want more followers on Instagram. Whatever that goal is, all those tricks and trades and skills I'm going to show you today for design should amplify that goal and not be used to be, well, it's because I like it. That was the first rule number 1 in college, per se, of a critique. If you've never had the opportunity to go through a formal design critique, never say, I don't like it or I don't like it. It's not an answer. So another aspect of design I kind of want to talk about, and kind of with the goal aspect of it, is that modern design now needs a reason to exist. I think there was just an article put out I saw about how nobody really designs just to design anymore. Like, they used to kind of just, designers would design on their own for stuff. And now it's more, you design for commercial purposes for something. So the delineation between fine art and design, and a lot of times when you're in college and design school, they think you can do both. And some people do both. But there are definitely different goals for both of them. So if you look at this advertisement for Maypo, I don't even know, some oatmeal something or other, I don't know, it just looked funny. So the the goal of this design, why they put this together, is they want me to do something. They want me to go buy this product. They gave me a coupon, tell me what it's about, blah, blah, blah. In fine art, what does Vermeer want me to do here? I don't know. Look at his artwork. I mean, an artist might have a goal in mind. Sometimes they'll tell you, sometimes they won't tell you. If you look at a lot of songwriters and musical artists, a lot of times when you ask, what's your song about? They go, I don't want to say. It's up to the listeners to interpret it. That's what I want to happen. So in fine art, that's okay. Design, not so much. Your clients are not going to be happy if we're like, well, we don't know what to tell them. They can kind of interpret it the way they want to. You're like, no, I'm paying for this. Like, it doesn't work. So that's another kind of delineation between that design and why design, when we're looking at and deciding on what's good, what's not so good, is thinking about these things. So I'm going to go over it cut off a little bit, but it's the 12 elements and principles of design. So kind of if you think about it, the elements are the individual pieces. They're the bricks. They're the things that we can do things with, whether that's an image, shapes, lines, color, all that stuff. The principles is how you arrange them. What do you do? How are you putting them together to create the deliverable at the end, whether that is your website, your flyer, your business card, whatever it is. So I have one disclaimer as I do this, and that's that these elements and principles, like I said, can be applied to all visual media. So it doesn't matter what media you're working in, they all will apply. They might have their own little differences, or how they react to things. The myth is that all designers are in agreement as to which elements and principles are included. If you go online, you will see there are some variants on this. Sometimes they duplicate, sometimes they don't. Sometimes there's 13, there's 12, there could be 6. So it's just kind of little differences out there. I kind of put that at the bottom. I had math there. I figured for this audience it should be binary. But that, it still is an art form, so design and art works a lot in the gray area. You have to be okay with that. But there are, like I said, some elements and principles that apply to everything. So the 6 elements, and we'll kind of go through these, but line, shape, space, color, texture, and value. Again, these are our building blocks, the bits and parts and pieces that we're going to be working with. So the first 3 are kind of self-explanatory. Line is a line. It can be curved, it can be straight, it can be thick, it can be thin. There's variants of them. Shapes could be all different shapes, could be geometric, could be organic shapes. Space, you could have the negative and positive space of objects. If you've heard of that, if you've taken any kind of figure drawing class or any kind of drawing class, I'll talk about, look at the negative space. It's basically the space around the shape. But that is something to manipulate, and it is a building block within design. If you heard a lot of that designers like white space, that's what they're talking about. They use that white space as an element in the design. So it has importance, don't get rid of it. The next one is color. This one, I've spent semesters learning on color theory, so we're not going to go too crazy into it, but just know we all kind of from elementary school, primary colors, yellow, red, and blue, and then you have your secondary and tertiary colors. The color wheel, if you haven't seen this before. But just taking one aspect of color and how you can manipulate it or how there's variance in it is that one side of the color wheel is warm, another side is cool. So with just knowing that there's variance within color itself, knows how you can use these. Kind of later on when we talk about principles and stuff, I'll kind of make a little bit more apparent, but I wanted to bring this up now. On how color is a building block, and it's a very complex block in itself. Texture is another one. Again, it's pretty self-explanatory in websites. Maybe you're thinking of, oh, okay, I could see this. Maybe it's background texture or something. Or if your designer is like, yeah, it needs something in the background, it needs a texture or something. That they can also kind of come in variants. You have very detailed textures to very heavy-handed, kind of more details. And they all take on different values and properties of themselves. But it is, again, another one of those building blocks to use. Value. Value kind of applies to everything, as I've kind of shown here. You're probably most familiar if you talk of value, which is dark to light. Anything dark to light, that's what we're talking value, is the grayscale. Kind of, you've seen that probably on many things before. But when you're looking at it in comparison to, say, texture, color, line, all that stuff, these other, this is where it gets a little confusing, elements take on properties of value. So for instance, that top line of color, if I were to Xerox that in black and white, I'm going to get that grayscale, because each color has an inherent value to it. Any texture has an inherent value. Fonts have an inherent value to them. And line, just the spacing or the width of the line can take on different values. Some look darker, some look lighter. The 6 principles of design. Now, this is the part of, okay, we have all those building blocks. We have all these colors and lines and textures and things. So how do we put them together to have effective, good design? So the 6 principles I'm going to go over is unity, harmony, contrast, space, or space again, but a little different, balance, and hierarchy. This is where it gets a little less concrete, like this is a line, and it gets into like, this is a concept. Now, how you accomplish that can happen in myriads of ways. And that's why I say sometimes you have to be okay with working in that gray area of design. One way is not always the right way. There are many right ways. It just sometimes depends on the setting, the goal, the content that you have at hand, all those elements, and your users, of course. Unity. So some of these are very kind of hard to describe at first, but you know it when it doesn't happen. So basically it means everything is working together in a focused effort. However, disunity can be unity. There are some designers that they are like chaotic designers. Their goal is to confuse you and make it look very disoriented and disjointed and ununified. But to me, that kind of borders on fine art, because no one can communicate that way. But anyway, I'm going to look at 2 kind of expressions of unity tonight, and that's proximity and similarity. So proximity, nearness in place, time, or order. Tonight we're going to just look at kind of place or order, but again, these principles apply to any design, and motion design is a factor of visual design. And when you're working in that 4th dimension of time, it is a factor. So it can be used in that sense. So here's kind of like a little example. There's different pieces of information here. If I would say, is this useful? Yeah. And a utilitarian view? Sure, I gave you all the information you need to know for my event that's coming up, right? I want you guys to come and attend this event. I gave you everything here, so what's the problem? It's kind of hard to understand it at a quick moment notice or glance. Things are a little out of sorts. So if you kind of thinking of the idea of proximity and grouping things in nearness and place, time, or order, if we just reordered them, it makes a lot more sense. Because thinking in that user perspective, they're going to want to know, what is it, when is it, and where is it? So just grouping like things together. So date and time should be near each other. They shouldn't be on opposite ends of your flyer, because that's really confusing for somebody. They have to make a bigger mental leap to understand it versus having it near to each other. For similarity, it's a comparable aspect or a correspondence. So I like to think of this kind of unity on a website. It's a perfect example, especially in the design phase of the website, because it's the rules that you are establishing that are going to happen throughout the entire site. As a designer, this is another one of those college things that get drilled into your head. You're actually a rule maker. You know, you are there to set parameters. So I don't want to see every button a different color on your website. I want to have rules applied to them so that I know anytime I see this blue thing, it's a button, I'm going to press it. A headline, the rule is it's going to be bold, it's going to be italic, and it's going to be that font. And it's going to be paired with this font for the paragraph, so that when you take the 10,000 mile high view, you can understand very quickly and easily what things are. So just by doing that, which a lot of modern websites kind of force you to do that, you can break it on your own, but it creates a unity throughout the entire website, just visually, on the visual end of things for now. So that can also apply. Books, long documents, PowerPoints, I see this all the time. Every slide shouldn't look different. You know, set some rules from the beginning, like, okay, my headlines are always going to be like this, my bullets are always going to be this, you know, my font is pretty much going to be this, maybe adjust the size. It creates a unity. It creates that recognition that people aren't every single time wasting time trying to figure out what it is, and then they start to listen to what you're saying or what you're trying to get them to do. Harmony is next. And I know I'm going through these. I just want to say I hope I'm not fire hosing too much, but we will have time later too. You can come up and ask me specific questions or at the end, and we can talk about. And I have some actual real world examples of how you see when this stuff isn't worked out correctly. So just FYI. Harmony is another one to kind of figure out as far as wording around it, but and again, I like to think of unity as more of the umbrella, the bigger, the website, the book, this bigger, the PowerPoint, the bigger kind of project, where harmony could be that page, that slide, that, card, whatever it is. So you can be very focused in when harmony on a specific page, where unity kind of takes the whole project into view, if that makes sense. So harmony, we'll look at two aspects of harmony, is alignment and continuation. Alignment's pretty self-explanatory. It's arrangement along a straight line. Whether it's vertical, horizontal, whether that's through the middle, through the top. Basically, we as humans like things in an orderly fashion. And when they're in an orderly fashion, we like it. And this is kind of touching on just the surface of using grids in design, and that's why that grid structure is there. Print designers knew about grids a long time before responsive websites. I'm just going to put that out there. I think when that happened and it blew programmers' minds or developers' minds, the designers were like, I know that. Give that to me. I do with grids all day long. The grid is there to create that alignment and some rhythm and repetition and all that, but it really helps you kind of align the things, say, on that particular page. Another little nugget of wisdom I got from my professors was, so for instance, if I moved this square up just a little bit, higher above the other two, just a little, it would bother us. It bothers us because it's just a little bit off. But she's like, if you take that block and you put it all the way up there, then I think you did it on purpose and not on mine. So she's like, if you're going to do something, do it big or it's going to look like a mistake. and it's going to look like a mistake that somebody wants to fix it. So again, your user is going to be focused on that, like why is that higher than the other things, versus what you're saying or trying to get them to do or to click the button or whatever it is. So these little things matter. Continuation is an extension to a further point. That's the definition of continuation. So what does this mean? Well, for example, a page, maybe this is a print piece or something. Western language, we start top left and we read. We're used to columns in newspapers and things, so we'll read down first and then over. That is our pattern that we've established, and we're used to it. If there's 2 columns, obviously. But what if I put that line right there? Well, now I'm forcing your eye to read here, go through there, continue over there, and then come back here. So just with that little element, I just forced your eye to go in a direction that probably wouldn't have before. So where does this really come into play? Oh, I just kind of showed you the path, eyeline path. Is I see this on websites a lot that I help out with images. So you have text and an image, and it's some kind of face. This is my kitty cat. But anything, I'm going to tell you this flat out, anything with eyes we are attracted to as human beings, particularly other human faces, we're going to look at them. And if they're looking over there, we're going to look over there. You might not physically be on a website and go, what are they looking at? But mentally, your eye flow will go off the page. So with this, we'll start Western, top left, go down, go over the image, and we just kind of keep going. Nothing is bringing us back to the other stuff. This is the important stuff, right? This is probably the text, the sign up here, my explanation, whatever it is. All you gotta do to fix this, flip it. Flip it. Now it's creating a nice little circle. So your eye will start and go down over the image, back to the top. You'll see this a lot for landing pages, sales pages. This is a lot used in those where that image is really important about what's in it. And especially if there's a person or even things, hands, anything that makes a shape. You'll see actually, this is a Renaissance painting technique. You'll see if you look up a lot of Renaissance art, they have triangles in their paintings, and it's to visually keep your eye in the painting and not go off into space. So we stole this from them, us designers, modern designers, from Renaissance painters. Contrast. I think there's probably 2 areas where it's probably the biggest takeaways if you take away anything, and contrast is one of them. So contrast is the state of being strikingly different from something else, typically something in juxtaposition or close association. Juxtaposition just means next to it. So in this instance, my little example here, it's got black dots and then a blue star, completely different. So the point I was trying to make here, even with my font weight, is that strikingly different. So remember that little bit, if there's just a little bit of difference, we look at it as a mistake. If there's a big difference, it looks like it was done on purpose. So you can use those types of contrast to force people to pay attention to certain things when you want them to, or in the order you want them to. The biggest problem areas I find with this is color and size for contrast. Like, things aren't working, and it's usually because there's a problem with contrast in color or size. So color. I get this, but Amy, I made sure to make my design super bold. My ad and next week, the magazine coming up is super bold. No one's gonna miss it. And then I see something like that. And I'm like, okay, so if everything's turned up to 11, my eyes are gonna start melting. I don't wanna see this. It's all up here. I can't, so yeah, you made it super bold so that everything is super bold and I can't see any of it. because there's no contrast. And it's hard to read. So color. Websites, I see this happen a lot too. Not enough contrast. No one wants to read that. It's hard. Stop it. It's actually even not good for people that have vision problems. Like, it's very hard for them to read that. That one, now on here it's not too bad, but on my computer, if I have access to the slides afterwards, maybe this is called a color vibration. It's hard to look at, like that other kind of ad. It is, yeah, it vibrates. And it actually is a biological reason of the rods and cones in your eyes are firing at the same time, and it doesn't know what to do with it. So that high color vibration, just not enough contrast, right? Easy fixes though. Say, I can't change that yellow, that's their brand color, they don't want me to change it. Okay, fine. Use a darker font color. It's more contrast, higher contrast, easier to read. While the color combo is not my favorite color, red and blue color combo, by adjusting the value of that blue, making it darker so that there's more contrast between them, at least I can read it without my eyes feeling like they're vibrating out of my skull. Problem area 2 is size and contrast. So, Amy, what gives my design looks so boring? Usually it's because there's not enough contrast in size. So this can be deceiving. So for this little example, I kind of made up this flyer of this, my fictional real estate agent here. Everything is on there. There's some color, there's images, there's text. There's nothing wrong per se, but meh. It's kind of meh, nothing really stands out. But if I just used the principle of contrast and the size of some of these things, I can make the design look a lot more interesting. Now, this kind of touches on the second one that is really important, the hierarchy, that it kind of makes what's more important more visible. And that's a decision between you and the client the designer has to make between what's important. But for this, pretty much if I'm going to be buying a house, I kind of want to see the house. Like, that's the most important thing. But just even doing that, we can still see our picture, we can still get our address or phone number, everything is still there. But this is a lot more interesting to see and catch your eye than this one, because this is kind of monotonous, that has some contrast. Space. So the principle of space is basically kind of going into like the third dimension on a two-dimensional plane. So you're faking it, whether through size to make something look farther back, whether it's overlapping things, or color. Remember that push-pull, warm-cool kind of thing, where you could play with space in that sense. This sometimes, you see this parallax design in websites of things moving, overlapping each other. Starts to happen more, but a lot in print design. I think it happens a little bit more, where you're kind of forcing that foreground, background kind of push-pull. Just know, again, this is just, we'll see an example. I have this where you can see how that overlapping makes certain things come forward, come back, and things like that. Balance. This is the balance in the sense of the distribution of the visual weight of objects. So while balance doesn't mean that if I have an image on this side, I have to have an image on that side, it could be two different things, like an image or maybe it's just a gray box, like maybe that's part of the design, and some text. But if you kind of almost step back and look at it, it's balanced because the visual weight of those two are equal. So it doesn't look like it's falling over on one side, or one side's too heavy and it's pulling the other side. They're balanced in a sense, even though they're not equal. So again, balance doesn't mean that you need to repeat the same thing on both sides. Oh, if I have text in here, I have to have text over here. That could be very boring. and repetitious. This is balance is the reason why working with centered text is very difficult, and why I usually tell people don't try it unless you're experienced in it. Because as soon as you center that text, everything else wants to be centered. Everything else wants that complete symmetrical balance. And if it's not, it just feels wrong, because maybe part of the piece feels very balanced and the other part feels out of whack. So that's why I say use it, but you have to kind of use it at a little bit of a caution. So unbalanced really comes down to there's no potential for movement. So if I have all my stuff weighted, say on a page, to one side, there's no potential for my eyes to move around the design to see anything. And it'll feel that way. It'll feel like, it's heavy on this side. And that's no fun. Just like a teeter-totter, if everybody was on one side, no one's having any fun. Balanced, now there's a potential for movement. Now there's potential for my eye to go, there's a lot more things on this page that I could look at, and I stay longer and read what you had to say. So there's more fun. And this could be symmetrically balanced. Again, doesn't have to be the same object on each side, but it has to visually be balanced. But it could also be asymmetrical. Asymmetrical balance is in balance only because there is something else on the other side. So if, say, all my text is over here, I can have something that's maybe smaller but pops out, like a call out. Kind of, if you've done those in print design or web design, a little call out, something that's going to kind of catch your attention, even if it's smaller or kind of in a separate space. It still creates that balance because you have somewhere to go with the design. And so this is the second piece of the two things. If you take away contrast and hierarchy, hierarchy is the next one. If everything is important, then nothing is. Same with art, that ad before. If everything is the most important thing on the website or the home page, and it all gets equal value, someone coming to it is not going to know what to look at first. And a lot of times they get kind of just frustrated or just kind of confused, and they move on. They don't pay attention to anything. This is something sometimes we as designers have to work with the clients to determine what is the most important. A lot of times, it's all important. Okay, well, what's really, really important? Like, what would you want? What's the one thing you want them to do first? Then what would you like them to do? And then what? And then what? And then what? So we, as humans, we like patterns. Like, we recognize patterns really easily. So when you disrupt that pattern with using size, color, shape, all that stuff, to create something that stands out from the rest, we're going to pinpoint it very quickly. We're going to see it first. So again, this kind of drives back to that goal that we were talking about. So before working on the website, before you get into these kinds of, even the design decisions, this should be talked about first. What's the most important thing here? And that's probably why designers will really push for content first, because they don't know what to emphasize. Oh, no, just build my website, just put lorem ipsum, just placeholder stuff. I could do that, but is it going to be as effective as if I knew ahead of time what you were saying, what's most important, what's second, third? No, it's not going to be as effective. It's not going to reach that goal that you want. So just backing up my fellow designers here. So when they push back and say, no, we need copy, or we need at least an idea of what these images are going to be, that's why. They're trying to be strategic about the decisions they make so that that goal happens. So as we talked about, hierarchy is a disruption. It could be a disruption of one thing, two things, three things. So say it's a disruption of space. That's good, right? You know, we have 3 different things on our page, and I separate one with using space, right? It's physically separate from the other 2. That automatically says, okay, these 2 are more important than this one, because I've separated it. If they're all equal like this. What's a little better? Maybe size. Okay, so they're spaced equally, but the sizes are different. So that creates a hierarchy in itself. I'm going to look at the biggest thing first. It's going to catch my attention first, second, third. And the best is if you could use both of them. So using the idea of separation with space and differences in size, that's going to create like the best example of forcing someone to see 1, 2, and 3. There's no question at that point as to what you're trying to tell them is the most important thing that you want them to look at. So, I've scoured the interwebs and looked for some examples. I know nothing about these designs. I know nothing about the organizations. I just thought, I'm like, well, that's a good example to use for this or that. So, this first one is a postcard for a Broadway-esque show somewhere, naked in Alaska. So I call this the squint test, if you can see up there. Basically, if you squint at your design, what do you see? You know, for this one, not much. I see a person's face, right, because we're always drawn to faces, and you're just like, what is going on with this picture? I see maybe half of Valerie, I see April, and this yellow logo-ish thing, but really a lot of it gets hidden. And it's because there's not enough contrast, right? That background is way too busy, not enough contrast with the text, and using it as like a person as like a wallpaper behind text. We're always going to start to look at the person because, again, we're human, we see faces, we get drawn to that. So what's better? Maybe taking a step back. Maybe you don't have to put all that information on there. Maybe some of that information could be in the back of that mailer. And this is going to grab your attention in the mailbox. So if you haven't recognized it, there's our triangle, that kind of the eye flow. Face is looking up, she's looking down, her arm is even going back around again. We keep looking at that. And their expressions and everything like that makes us interesting. The foreground background, so even though they have this very warm orange background that normally would come forward, they have this muted photograph here. If this was in color, it would conflict, right? We wouldn't quite know where to look because they'd both be maybe vying for our attention. But because they have it in grayscale, it kind of fades away a little bit. And then you come down here, they're using this line right here to kind of draw your eye over to their logo. And they have very high contrast using, you know, the white on the orange for their tagline. So in comparison, like if you got those 2 postcards in the mail, this one probably grabs your attention more to flip it over and then put all that other information, times, dates, whatever you need to, on the back. This is another one. I was seeing a lot of, I hear a lot of the laughs because I think we've all been here as a designer. It's like, oh, we have this thing coming up and here are all of our sponsor logos. You're like, wonderful, this is great. Now, obviously, our client has, you know, an obligation to their sponsors that they're going to put them on the flyer or whatever, however they presented it or sold it. Fine, okay. Taking our 2 biggest lessons, hierarchy and contrast. Fail, you know, on both. Contrast, everything is the same. This is just like, what we call wallpaper design because it starts to just become wallpaper. You can't read anything. It's one big blob. And hierarchy, I don't know what's that. to me, if I squinted, the first thing that really sticks out is that brain core therapy logo in the corner, that blue one, probably because it's simple, it's clear, there's enough contrast there, I see it. I shouldn't see that first. Like, what is this thing? What am I going to? What is this about? So how do you fix things that happen this way? Because sometimes it's out of your control, and the client's like, oh, we need to have these sponsor logos on the back of this t-shirt, or on the flyer, or on whatever, the invitation. Okay, well, there's some things you can deal with. How about these all go grayscale? Sets them back. Keeps them all. Remember that balance, like visual balance? Even though it's not the same thing, at least it's in balance with each other. Because they're all different colors, it's all vying for our attention. Put a grayscale, at least fades in the back a little bit. And then probably make them smaller so that you can pull out the really important information so we know, what is this event? What's it for? When is it? Where is it? Do I want to go? Because I'm kind of guessing your sponsors would probably, or if you get any, I guess, backlash from, oh, it's not in color, I think the sponsor would probably want the people to show up. That's more important than having their logo in color. So I would say that back to them as the reason. But here's another example of a flyer. Same thing, it's an event, Chamber of Commerce in Utah Valley. Putting this show on. I squint, yeah, I could see the title, prime time, May 6th, connect, free. Okay, now I'm intrigued. Now I want to know more, right? Just that, those things make me want to go into all this other information, that's secondary, tertiary information that I might need to know or would like to know, but it's not important as, what is this? When is it? Oh, it's free. That always gets people attention. Can also look at the way that they designed this, how it's kind of off balance, or that balance thing. This guy in the front here is musician, is kind of our pivot point here. But even look at that, remember that foreground background playing with that? Even though he's much smaller than the image behind him, he still pops out a little bit because he's in front of it. And we're creating space, even though there really physically isn't. We're creating that space behind it so that we can see these things. And the balance, if everything was tilted, this 30 degrees probably, it would look like it was going to fall over. Probably the design would almost feel like it was tipping over, but because that guy is there, straight up and down, vertical, and those three other, the May 6th, the free, and the other little orange free expo table is vertical as well and not tipped, it anchors the rest of that whole design to the page. So again, sometimes design isn't like right or wrong, or not right or wrong, but like one way or the highway kind of thing. There's a lot of gray area, and it's a lot of times you just have to kind of look at it and feel like, what's wrong here? Something doesn't feel right. Well, what is it? Can I not see it? Does it feel awkward? Why does it feel awkward? Well, it's all off to one side. Nothing's holding it on this side. Maybe you put something there. So it's a lot of questions. I think with design, the more questions you can ask yourself as you're doing it, especially if you're by yourself, you're the only one, you're a freelancer, or maybe you're the only one at your company that's in charge of the design or is doing design, you're a one-man shop kind of thing. The more you can ask yourselves, why does this not look right? You'll get to the actual answer instead of going, oh, this design doesn't work, or whatever it is. It's really what's not working. Is it the colors, is it contrast, is it hierarchy? Take that squint test. A lot of times I'll back up from my computer and go to the other side of the room and look at it. And then it's like, oh, well, that's too dark. Now I see it, but when I'm up here, I can't really see it. Or print it out, put it on your wall, step back, that also helps too. Just taking that a step away from it to see the bigger picture, as you will, of the design. So that is my presentation in a quick roundup. I do have books if you're interested. Like I have books on typography, on grids, if you've ever really want to see like crazy grids. and some other design books I think that I've scrounged up from my office. Or if you have any questions or want me to look at anything, we have the happiness bar too. If there's something specific that you'd like these wonderful people to help you with. So I'm here all night.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Will you make that deck available, or?
I guess I can if, yeah, through, okay. Yeah, no problem. Sure.
Somebody with a business, how should they, at what point do they hire a professional designer, or how should they go about the decision when they know they're ready to actually hire a professional instead of kind of doing it themselves?
One, it's a little comfortability with what you're doing. If you've done it before, I would say sometimes I see, well, we have an established brand, like a visual identity. So a lot of times when that's established, it's a lot easier for someone in-house to be like, okay, they've already told me what fonts, what colors, whatever I need to use and how I use the logo. So that takes a lot of this prep work and it's done for you. So then it's a matter of like plugging in your information. I think that anybody can, do. I would say the line starts to cross if you start to go into print, if you've never done it before. Because there's a lot of technical things on the print end of prepping files that you need to have the correct software to do, that you need to have the knowledge to do. Because I would hate for somebody to just print out 10,000 copies of something and realize like, oh, this was an RGB and not CMYK and all my colors are wrong. And the printer goes, you approved it. So that's where I would say, if you've never done it before, hire somebody, at least to get you set up with something so that you can use it, in the future, like that. But yeah.
What tools, as a designer, would you suggest using for accessibility purposes when you're building a site?
There is accessibility checkers I know of that it'll like kind of scan things and say this contrast isn't enough. This is too small. I don't know them off the top of my head. I'd have to look around for that. Do you look like you remember?
Yeah. I mean, even if you go into either Chrome, Safari, or Firefox, and the developer tools, they will all run contrast for accessibility testing.
Yeah, there's even some websites too and stuff I think you can do.
Yeah, there's definitely websites where you can
yeah, you punch in your URL and it'll be like, whoa, this contrast isn't enough. I think even Adobe is starting to build a lot of that stuff into their software now to say like, hey, this might not have enough contrast, just FYI,
Also, WebHint.io, they do full testing and with accessibility and everything.
Yeah, those would be some helpful tools.
Yeah.
For the visual end of things.
So what do you think of Canva for simple design?
I know a lot of clients that use Canva. They've gotten more diverse. Like at first it was very simple stuff. So for Instagram posts, it's very nice because you can just on the template and be like, yes, this is Instagram, this is for, Facebook, this is whatever. They have the sizes all available to you. That's definitely all digital. I think they might have some print templates now, but what I don't know is how well they are with CMYK stuff. Again, really, if you're going to be printing anything commercially, go with InDesign, go with your trusted print publication software. But yeah, and that's, I think in the pro version of Canva, you can set up your brand standards. So that's always a good idea, and say, this is always going to be the blue, this is always going to be the whatever, this is my logo, these are the fonts, and that way other people in your office maybe or somebody can use them. I've even done that, or know some designers that do that. They'll set up the templates for them in Canva and then give it to their clients so that they can just kind of run with it from there. Yes.
Is there a rule about fonts, the number of fonts? Like 3, 8, 7, 20?
Well,
20.
Yeah, probably not 20. Well, I don't know. You know what? There's no rule, but a general guideline, 3 max. And that's if you're good. 2 if you don't really know what you're doing.
The one that was on an angle, that example, I'm not sure how many fonts were there.
It's probably, can I get back to that one? I see 2 different weights, same font. That's the variant, you know. You can do a lot with 2 fonts because they've varied the weight of it. So, I mean, I don't know for 100%, but I mean, it's a sans serif, and then you got the primetime crazy novelty font. You know, the little logos might have their own, but those are very small and they can't do anything about that. So yeah, 2 is good to start with when you're starting. 3 you can do. Beyond that, once again, you kind of think of designer as rule maker. You just have to set rules. This is only going to be used for this. This is only going to be used for that. This is only going to be used for this. That way, it doesn't look, because if you don't, it just looks a little crazy, you know, especially 20 fonts. But I've never seen that many. But yeah, that's the usual guideline.
The relationship between serif and sans serif. Do you, like, if you had a serif headline, can you give, is there something about having a sans serif subhead, or?
So to mix 2 serif fonts, why? You know, just use the serif font, right? So why would I pick one serif font for my headline and another serif for a paragraph? So I would,
I'm asking about the opposite.
right. So I would flip it, you know. So I would use either or. Now, generally speaking, print design, serif font, web, sans serif, but that was way back before monitors got really nice and pretty, and high resolution, and we could see all the little feet on the serif fonts before they look like blobs. So that's why I was like, no, sans serif, that's it. Now we can see them, it's more crisper, so there's not that real restriction there. Print though, I will say, like a book, you'll never, I'd be hard pressed and I would like to see it. And it's probably really hard to read if you picked up a 300-page book that was in a sans serif font. There's a reason serif fonts exist, and it is for your eye to flow from character to character. Those little feet actually play a part in the font, and that is to make it more legible and readable. So for a long copy, like a novel, it's always going to be in a serif font, and shorter text is usually for sans serif. Not always, but that's a guideline as well. So that's why you see people kind of play with it back and forth. Maybe in their web, the serif is the headline, the sans serif is the body, and then maybe in the print they reverse it. Something like that. Did you have a question?
Well, the other rule is no Comic Sans.
No. Yes, that's the other part of, I forgot. That's like the most important rule of design school. Day 1, don't ever use Comic Sans. Like, don't show up with that font unless you're designing for a kindergarten class.
A lot of when a client shows up with something they say, it has to be in papyrus.
Yes. Optima is another one. Don't give that to that's a little higher level, but yeah, don't give that to a design professor. Optima
Those are my 3 fonts.
is also no-go. Yeah, Papyrus, Comic Sans, Optima. They're going to be like, nope. You fail. No. Sure.
First of all, thank you. That was a lot to put into the brain. I'm very big on contrast these days for a couple of reasons. The eyes are getting old.
Yeah.
But as far as I'm concerned, pretty much the entire internet is broken as far as contrast goes. Websites that should know a lot better than to put medium gray text on a white background do it. And as a result, I won't read it. I just won't. I'll send them an email. Please fix your website. It's broken. And, then I let it go. But in the meantime, I found a plugin for Firefox, an extension called Blacken, Blacken. And it 99.9% of the time fixes all text contrast on any website.
Yeah.
You would be amazed at the lack of contrast on, say, Twitter, and how much better Twitter is when there is proper text contrast. And that's just one example of, so the problem is that I forget that I have this, and I'm
Yeah.
doing a website, and everything looks good. But I have rules for text, nothing more than, 111, 222, 333 on the outside, and that's it, if I want them to read the text.
Right.
If I don't want them to read the text, I'll make it bright pink,
Yeah.
But it is, so just from that one viewpoint, it's a design thing that caught on with the internet sort of in general. And I said, why are they doing this? If a book was in light text, I would never read it.
Yeah, it'd be hard to
It's-
read. And
So,
Yeah.
as purveyors of the interwebs, we are responsible to fix this. So, thanks.
yeah, it's a lot of too. I know. I think more print designers get chastised for this as making the font too small.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there is a point where fonts look clunky, and I don't know why, but in design school, I think we all come in freshman year and start designing things, and the fonts look huge to the professor, so we get like beat down, I guess, into like making them smaller and smaller, and they just keep getting smaller. No one's like, wait, stop! I can't read it, anymore. So then at some point you go, oh yeah, no one can read this. So I think maybe it's just like that.
Yeah.
Same as the internet as far as getting lighter. I think it's, I don't know. It's sometimes I don't personally might not make the paragraph text black, but I'll do 222, and
Well,
it's
yeah.
just a little bit, so it's not super harsh,
Yeah.
but it's still dark enough.
Dark,
But,
perfect black can be too dark.
Yes, yeah. So okay, shade or two lighter. That's
Yeah.
still enough.
Yes.
But I see what you
Yeah.
mean. Yeah, the lightness it's hard to read.
I told the developer, I said, please never stop making this extension. I have to have it. I can't do the
Yeah.
internet without it.
And that's why I think nowadays, I think more now in curriculums, that even though I went to UMass Dartmouth and I go back there regularly to talk to the students and stuff, but now a lot of the web portion is in their curriculum, where when I was going through it wasn't really, it was still a computer science thing. It wasn't a design thing. So they weren't in on the conversations with each other so much, and now I think they're having more of the conversations with each other. So when the designer goes, ooh, look, pretty medium gray, the developer goes, no, people
Yeah.
can't read that, and we're going to get so many, complaints, so make it darker, And they go, oh, I didn't realize, because I'm used to print, and it
Right,
always comes out a
right.
little darker, or whatever the case is. So I think those conversations are happening more now between them than they did before,
Good. So it's coming back around.
hopefully.
Yeah.
But there's still going to be,
Yeah.
I don't like it. Anybody else, or I'll be up here too if you want me to take a look at anything. But